Hey everybody, it's time for another Duran's demo brought to you by Roaming Around. Today we're talking about sleeping pads. And much like Mr. T, I pity the fool who goes into the backcountry with the wrong sleeping pad, and a lot of people do. Why is this? Because generally when we think of sleeping pads, we think of something nice and thick and cushiony to keep our keister off of the ground. And while that's true, and we should aim for comfort in a pad, I would argue the primary purpose is to keep you warm, because we are going to lose way more heat from the ground being cold than we are even from the air being cool around us. But Duran, you say, I bought a really nice sleeping bag. Won't that keep me warm? Well, guess what? The time for questions is after the video, but since you asked nicely, I'm gonna go ahead and answer. Your sleeping bag needs loft. All the feathers or all the insulation needs to be able to puff up to keep you warm, and it can't do that when you put your weight on it and crush it to the ground. That is why we need a good sleeping pad, especially if we're going to go out during the shoulder season, and especially if we're going out during the winter. So, when we're talking about how warm the pads are, we're really talking about R value. Much like the insulation in your home, this is kind of a rating of how good the insulation is, how good of a job it does of keeping you warm. A 0 to 2 is going to be good for a summer pad when we're not expecting the ground to be very cool, if at all. Something around an R value of 3 or higher is going to be good for spring, summer, and fall camping, kind of a 3-season solution. And if we're going out during the winter, really we want a minimum of an R value 4 pad. They can get much higher, and R values are additive, so we can combine a couple of 2.5 or 3 R value pads to arrive at something that is an R value 5 or 6 and able to last us through the winter. Now that we've talked about R value, we can talk about what kind of pad to grab, because there are really 3 different styles. There are the foam pads, there are the self-inflator pads, and then there are the fully inflatable pads. I'm gonna hold that up real quick, and if you can decipher my chicken scratch, you can kind of read about the pros and cons. But now we're gonna go over it very quickly. Foam pads, like the Z-Lite Sole from Thermarest, are relatively inexpensive. This one retails for $45. They're relatively warm. It has an R value of 2, and they are relatively light. This thing comes in at about 14 ounces, so we're just under a pound for this guy right here. I guess it's more silver and yellow, not really white. The downsides are it's bulky. You can't really compact it down any further than this. But generally speaking, this thing's tough enough and durable enough that we can wear it on the outside of our pack, and that isn't a big deal. And a lot of people are gonna be happy with this as a long-term solution. Moving on from there, we get into the self-inflating pads, so-called because if you open up this valve over 30 minutes, it's going to draw in enough air as the foam in this expands to really kind of self-inflate. Of course, you're probably going to top off the thicker pads with a breath or 2 of your own. Advantages with this, well, it's warm. This one has an R value of 3. Cost-wise, they can be relatively inexpensive. The Trail Scout comes in at $55, but if we throw more money at the problem, you can end up with something even warmer and even thicker. This is 1 inch thick. Downside, well, it still has some inflatable element to it. It could pop in the middle of the night, and while you're still going to have a little bit of foam and a little bit of insulation from the ground, you are going to wake up on the hard ground. So that's the self-inflators. We get into the fully inflator, which really, if you're trying to save as much pack size and as much weight as possible, this is kind of what you need to be looking at. This is the Tensor from our friends at Nemo Equipment. It is 3 inches thick. It is crazy comfortable. It can be insulated. You can buy an insulated version of this and many other inflatable pads, and that's going to arrive at an R value of 3, although there are some similar products, Thermarest makes one, that are inflatable and can even have an R value of 6. Downsides to this, generally they cost more than the last 2 options, and they are the least durable. All you have here is air keeping you off of the ground. So if it does pop, you are going to be kind of out of protection. But yeah, that's the general wrap on sleeping pads. There are many, many more options to discuss, And in case you couldn't tell, I could keep talking about it all day. Come into the store and we can have a longer conversation. Thank you.